Nocturne by Chopin is the direct inspiration for Fauré's Nocturne number 6 in the same D-flat major luminous key. We shall not forget, after all, Fauré was only 4-year-old when Chopin died. So close they were in time compared to our perception sometimes outside of the context of the chronology. The inspiration is obvious and is not the only one, but in Chopin's case, what is the most striking is that the pianist has to sing a melodic line of a bel canto, which he loved so much with Bellini. And it could have been an accompaniment for a waltz. It could have been an accompaniment for perhaps a lullaby. That's kind of silly, but fun to try because of the same key. Chopin himself wrote his lullaby, the Berceuse. There's something soothing about D-flat major, surely, and for them composers as for us pianists today performing their music. I insist on the quality of the nobility of the accompaniment pattern in the Nocturne by Chopin. Yes, it is in 6/8, and yes, it is by division of 6/8 notes into 2 times 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yet inside the pattern of the 6/8 notes divided 2 times 3 by 16th notes, can't say it. But the pattern of the F's of the thumb subdivides the group of 6/16th notes, in fact, in 2 times 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, and not 1, 2, 3. This very subtle, gentle, rocking hemiola is so soothing, in a way like a berceuse, like the cradling for the lullaby that it is in a way not. But why not? After all, it's a nocturne, evening music, serata, serenata. And on top of that, the melody soars on the blue sky and goes above the octave to scoop the appoggiatura and drop by appoggiaturas down on the wrong note, which is corrected after the end of the bar. So in fact it doesn't land on the wrong note. It lands on the accacciatura, on the port de voix. Directly on the altered degree. Harmonically, in the left hand, it could become an augmented 5th chord, but in fact, it is just an appoggiatura from under, what we call it accacciatura for climbing, instead of appoggiatura, which is for leaning. Appoggiare and accacciare in Italian. And delaying the most possible its resolution on the upper note, therefore on the 2nd degree. Chopin is a master in this right hand melodic line with effects of vocalise of the opera let's say Bellini, bel canto. And the fact that he overshadows the melodic purity with these effects only gives time for the pianist to imagine rubato. This gentle swing of the pulse that allows for flexible bar lines, but not for flexible structure of group of bar lines. Within side, yes, not outside. In other words, 1, 2, 3, 4 is one with resolution on the next first, is one capsule of 4 bars. And then 2, 3, and then starts on the relative minor in duplets or duos, not duplets, duo, in thirds. He does that in the beginning of the Barcarolle when he goes Chopin, the more you know Chopin, the more it's its own universe, the more you relate them to each other. You don't confuse them, it's pieces, but in a way you see the common DNA. It's so touching. It's like being in a family and saying, oh, you look so much like your uncle. But the fact is that the left hand has this gentle rocking in the hemiolized waves, and the melody seems to be soaring independently of it. As they say in Chopin, ignore what the other hand does, which in fact could end up by slightly dislocating downbeats, for instance. À la Cortot. Most of the times composers would give a little rest, or 16th note rest in the left hand to hear the first note of the melody. Which is not the case here, because we do have a gentle reminder of the bass line. All these gentle reminders are to compensate for the short decay of the piano compared to this a run-on sentence melodic line that he wants to unveil and almost send to infinity. Everything here is about stretching and delaying and seeing further, as if we want to elevate ourselves by a larger breath, to a further determination, for a distant shore or a distant horizon line, which is poetically moving us so slowly, but so intensely, but gracefully at the same time. It's not intense in a sense of tension. It does create tensions and releases, actually, more tensions than releases, in order to bridge over the different sections. For instance, the melodic line goes above the octave, and that releases by dropping a cacciaturas, of which the last one is the longest to resolve. So it is not a simple line, it is also a complex but gently sophisticated line. Massenet wrote a Méditation de Thaïs for violin and orchestra. Also inspired by Chopin, I'm sure. And the fact of the going beyond the octave is the sense of larger breath. Take your breath and stay up there. The air is purified in the heights of human elevation. It's poetic. It really is not pianistic as such. It's through the piano that you express this poetry. or hear or imagine the propulsion of the left hand with its own softly, gently rocking hemiola, you will correspond each of the 3/8 notes per beat to the 8 notes of the right hand. It will become, with the melody, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, more shredded by beats, because you count 2 times 3 instead of 3 times 2. So you have a larger step for the same tempo motion rather than the shorter steps. He doesn't indicate that. He doesn't say, play the left hand pulsed as a hemiola, the right hand not. He just embeds it so subtly in the design of his accompaniment pattern. Had he wanted to have a 6/8 accompaniment pattern per se, he would have done like would have been almost slightly altered, but very close to the original version of a slow tempo Alberti bass. And if you observe the F, A and D being on the 10th rather than on the 3rd, in a more elaborate design of the accompaniment pattern of this nocturne, you do have variation, or rather a stretch in the space between the 3rd and the 5th usually. If it was in the same key, of course it's not. The most famous example among many obvious to come to mind of the Alberti bass, and here it would have been bunched, and here in Chopin is sort of Alberti. It's kind of silly. To spread the design on the 10th, which makes us forget Alberti quite quickly, at least the pattern that we are used to. It's so silly, I'm so really guilty for trying that, but it's just to prove the point. Of course, if you want to dislocate in the expressive rubato the departure of an important melodic note, usually the peak notes compared to then you would delay each of these notes for the left hand, as if the left hand allows it to blossom by itself and not with the harmonic bass root, for whatever it is worth, it is a bass root. And it's not wrong to play simple. There are several stanzas in the Nocturne, variations of. It is not unthinkable to suggest playing one of the stanzas a bit more straight in terms of pulse and simplicity of the flow, with a candor of a pure heart. That's hard to imagine with a pure heart, but nevertheless, all these effects start tainting it into a sophistication from which it still, the melodic line grows above and remains candid for me, even if so ornamented. But in the second stanza, one could eventually imagine more rubato because of the even more amount of decorations. For instance, the same, with a more secondary voice, chromaticisms, and there's sort of a horn. At this time, sort of ballerina dresses flowing in the air and drops of light tips of feet on the it's artificial, superficial to mention ballet and opera in the sense of the Bellini, compared to the dark, profound and austere accompaniment pattern. Nevertheless, by itself, it doesn't let us guess. Yes, chromaticisms inside itself. It's a very elaborate accompaniment, not only by the pulse of the hemiola, but also with suggestive here and there middle voices with stems for this chromatic descent through flat 2 in harmonic dimension as A major becoming a beatable flat. So you do have this suggest it, or to which point you want to bring it so out that it becomes a parallel sixth friend to the melodic line, which this way is not so lonely. And because of the accumulation of these effects, you could accumulate the amount of delay rubato. And the rubato is also organic because factually it's a pulse distortion, while in itself it's a harmonic motion distortion. It's the way the harmonies are complexly added in bigger number in a given bar to give the impression of almost suffocation, as it is in the case with the chromatic scale within one beat, when one beat was just in the opening a dotted quarter alone. So you have a stretto of melodic chromaticisms, but also of harmonic motion in this case. So much over faster by not 6/16 notes but by 4. This time unveiling the hemiola openly. Coming out is a hemiola. To contrast with the third stanza when it returns in the apparent more mirrored lake surface calm, just totally calm. He alternates the rhythmic accelerando, the melodic complexity of the articulation that adds more and more repeated notes, chromaticisms, leaves. Do parts just for the time. These moments of 30-second rests to catch one's breath. And anticipations, suspensions. And of course, all this beautiful and confusing complication of the melodic simplicity needs to be voiced. And I believe the melodic line should always prevail continuously from the beginning to the end. And when you have moments where the melodic line is written as here, with this accelerando of repeated notes, 2 triplets plus 4, 5 30 seconds, excuse me. This improvisato stretto, which is really undermined by the octaves, and then smaller sevenths until the second in the chromatic ascension of the secondary part, which was partly parallel, sort of apparently sweetly, but then goes its own way. And reaches that intense kiss of the second. shaped in appoggiatura, in anticipation with chromaticism, the drops of all the altered intervals that Bach already uses so beautifully, the drop of the tritone or of the diminished fourth to go around the real notes. So he could have gone, but he goes. Tools of Chopin, and perhaps in a point it becomes the tools of Rachmaninoff. At the turn of a note, the thin slice line of the border is almost clear, if not totally clear. So tough to remain in the style of Chopin when you love Rachmaninoff, who loved Chopin, who didn't, and therefore inspired by Chopin, Fauré, Rachmaninoff, Massenet, and so many more. But the fact is that the composition itself of this nocturne is a notated interpretation of an improvisatory moment that he must have played. Or perhaps he had most likely all these stylistic tools of his in hand, and he improvised equivalent type nocturnes for each soirée where he was invited to play for the high society in France. And of course the notation is there to set in stone this moment of fleeing grace that must have been just the ephemeral interpretation of an improvisation. At the time I don't think they called it improvisation or composition, they just called it Chopin play something. And I think that when he had to notate it, of course he notated all these little details of the ornamentation and some of the dynamics, and perhaps the publisher added more, and he copied it several times and into several publishers, and so it creates a multiplication of ur-text originals for different editions to argue and to bring out their own authenticity. But regardless, I don't think there is a capacity for anybody to claim an authenticity in such thing, because in fact it's fleeing as you speak, speak as you hear, sing as you think, dream as you play, and just vanish behind you as you imagined it in front of you. I think it's a magical moment that doesn't need to be so inscribed. Well, it is obviously in the engraving of the score, and we need to play it with that subtle freedom that allows it to sound like as if improvised now, even if it's in his words. This rupture of disbelief can happen. Of course, it has to do with technique. For instance, when in the third stanza he seems to reach a plenitude again in long values and calm accompaniment pattern. This multitude of small notes. We don't know. down that much? Did he just maintain the 12/16 notes? This imitation of a dropping on a marble floor of a pearl necklace of a lady in the high society. I like to imagine this kind of funny moments, but at the same time is in the high register something crystalline, something bells-like. And perhaps he liked it to be more intense rather than just so fluffy and possibly just ethereal, rather with that chromatic drop by semitones indicated with the C-flat upper ostinato. Possibly this gruppetto, as we call it in France, of many notes, I think 48 of them, over 16 of the left hand, seem to fall inadvertently somewhere, not exactly calculated by 4. Because there will be two aligned. But inevitably, after the chromatic drop, then there is a scale, appoggiatura going up, and dropping with the arpeggio. It's quite vertiginous. And in the case of soprano arias, in the linear style opera type, the soprano would take the time and do it vocally so that it sounds so marvelously like a bird. And this vocalise, then the orchestra would just follow and wait for the soprano to return to the note, and then... So we're tempted to imitate this on the piano, and sometimes because we're pianists, we think vertically the organization of the two hands together. So most likely the left hand should a little wait, organize itself to be the witness of the right hand's overboarding amount of notes to speak, sing, speech, throw, flow, petals of roses in the air. Is mesmerizing, almost vertigo-driven. A sense of dizziness that you have perhaps in a ballroom in the 19th century, or perhaps just a moment of eternity, like small death. Unlike concert halls today, in rows from the podium, organized in an acoustic box. They were all cramped around the piano, most of them there for non-musical reasons in the salon, rather for their own politics or their own social circles and their own agendas, and having to hear Chopin improvise on the spot and being around the piano, and perhaps tasting something more of an intimate exchange and between the pianist and the performer as listener, rather. Of course, that was a Freudian slip. They're not performers, they're listeners. But perhaps more active because all around and not all far away. And that gives a sense of perhaps greater intimacy for the performer. Not the need to project the pianissimo to the 140th row, but the idea that the pianissimo is played with the depth inside the keys. And when you play a legato where you overstay your welcome, a literally finger-pedaled, flat-fingered legato where the fingers leave after the second has played instead of after the next. But then you have non-legato, and then you have gruppetto, slow, fast, or resonant. All these different types of ornaments, or the very almost dramatic octaves that almost overwhelm you for a split second. In contrast to the lonely voice, sometimes in thirds, sorry for that, or in sixths, or in chromatic kiss, or almost angry, revolted octaves. And all that on a complete, continuous, non-stop from the beginning to the end, motion of 16th notes in the left hand. If it's the different clouds and weather changes of the mood happen in the right hand, the left hand remains motoric in the sense, soothing. While the right hand has all kinds of fragmented, ornamented, decorated, extroverted I would say variations is almost a redundancy. Perhaps expressions would be the right word. And when we reach the coda, we have the choice of a fourth stanza. Perhaps in minor, with the second voice. Etc. Again, I get derailed in my daydreaming. Of course, he finishes with a coda, which is the fact of what codas do. The tail in Italian or Latin. As Berlioz said on his funeral, supposedly he said, "Chopin, you kept dying all your life long, with all your pieces finished with a dropping chromatic scale of decay." I don't think it was meant ironically, though it possibly was, but tenderly, I still believe, admiratively. It's banal to go down chromatically, but when Chopin does it, the charisma of his playing. Keeps us away from banality. It must have been a very very agitated night that he was describing in this nocturne in his imaginary narration, for us to catch up on this or that, or surprised by this, enchanted by that, delayed by this, expecting that, and then ultimately reaching a point of acceptance. So much more is going on than just that, but yeah, I don't know of hardly more subtly difficult bar than this one, because we have to play 6 against 7 in a slow tempo. It would have been so tempting to have him write the 7th in the beginning of the last bar, and so we have 6 in again one note against one note. It would have been with the ritenuto, the 2 hands fitting would be. But no, we have to have 7 against 6. It's almost 1 against 1, but not totally. So you have to calculate your effect. Are you going to do 3 and 4, 4 and 3? 2, 2, 3 compared to the left hand, 6. At which point you do 2, 2, 2 and then 3. But then it's predictable, therefore it defeats the purpose of slightly dislocating it with 7, not 8, not 9. It's customary to these arias on piano, already in the concerto in E major. And the melody, and the octaves. And the many quick notes. Section, so to say, in relative minor, more dramatical. The leaps, the sixths, the repeated notes stay in minor. Octaves. The middle voice, the hemiola, the diminished 7th, and the duo with the bassoon. Resonant bell-like. So yes, we can say, if we put all these ingredients, then anybody can write a Chopin aria. The bells, the chromaticisms, the hemiola, the hibiola, of course, the rubato, which is sort of what holds it together in order to be in traction but calm, moving but emotionally intense while still flowing, like the left hand here. I think, no. As soon as you try to improvise a piece by Chopin, it sounds cheesy. It's a very subtle barrier between emotional, sentimental, and with sentimentality. which is sort of like as if you take cliches of affects and you just place them there because you know that's how they're going to function and bring the tear out of me because I'm perhaps an easy emotional reader or watcher or spectator, therefore the word rather, or listener. Chopin has this kind of sense of nobility in this apparent abandon to lyrical extrovertedness, like those arias of bel canto are, and they are there for the purpose of the text and the dramatic situation they're displaying. Whenever here is really words without sounds without words, and the sounds speak more than words because they don't define a word. They are the sound word. And they talk to us, and they talk to our ancestors, and they'll talk to our next generations. We just pass through the score and we go, ah, how beautiful, how meaningful, how tender, how intense, and everybody can see more of what they would like to enter in the piece from another point of view. Oh, the rhythm in Chopin, oh, the melody in Chopin, the harmonization in Chopin, the chromaticism in Chopin, oh, the rubato in Chopin, or the simplicity, the candor, as well as the sense of authenticity of his music coming from his country, but then tainted by France. Second country since his father was French, but Poland, of course, naturally, essentially, and how can we not remember all that? But even so, we cannot, we should not, and we don't need to make another Chopin. And all we have to do is, he gives us the opportunity to be Chopin for given split minutes when we play it. I think it's a great gift of, if interpretation is the art of recomposing the piece, but not in the notes, obviously, in order to be respectful. It's more like the art of appropriation. It's my nocturne while I played. It's my narration. It's through my emotion and my level of understanding and my intellect and my integrity for tempo keeping, less or not. That's why nobody can agree. Everybody thinks they know what is the right amount of what. Chopin is more this, Chopin is not enough that. Nobody can agree, not except for competitions where it's obviously a problem for the jury. But the fact is that when we just offer it to the audience and they receive it as a narration, they just receive it as a narration. And they don't filter it as a comparison unless they played it themselves. Of course, that makes it a little bit different. But hopefully not, because you can remain open-minded even in that case, hopefully too. To different points of view. Like all of a sudden this person loves it differently than me, so he needs something I didn't even see. Would it be this impulse in the left hand gently suggested? Or perhaps I disagree and I don't like this way, and why is the climax not demonstrated better, and where is the climax, and why is it climaxing all the time? And how is it possible to keep the quality of the sound, just the color, the D flat major, the 10th, and just play on colors, but think the pulse, but organize the melodic line, but delay the harmonic delays, but breathe and just make it all simple, as if all of these things in fact evaporate like parfum that you just smelled and it evoked for you smells of things, places, times, memories, hope, perhaps people, but it's just passed by with the wind. And so I think this kind of grace in the ephemeral presentation of Chopin is probably what leaves the most paradoxically lasting impression in the listener, who can say, oh, I remember 20 years ago I heard such and such play, that nocturne just took my heart. Hopefully they would say that for us performers. But because it's only what the piece itself is, and reveals itself as a chameleon to us differently, and we reflect it with our vibrating membrane of our musical soul to the audience. What a marvelous opportunity to share a little piece of humanity, of humanism. Thank you.